Welcome back. During the era of apartheid, South Africa was one of the world's biggest news stories. Since the collapse of that system, the country has become known for something else, its HIV/AIDS epidemic. The reporting of that story has led to a basic conflict between the government and the South African news media, not just on what to do about the epidemic, but over what actually causes the disease. The Listening Post's Sinead O'Shea now on the newspaper, the health minister, the battle over beetroot juice, and AIDS.
AIDS. Currently, 600 people a day are dying from the disease. The politics of AIDS has become a key issue, not just for South African citizens, but also for the South African media, whose very independence is being tested.
I think there are people within the South African government who are scared of the media and who feel that it should be under their control.
Officially, Thabo Mbeki's government denies the link between HIV and the AIDS virus and refuses to endorse the use of contraception as a means of prevention. Instead, some key figures have been promoting the use of alternative remedies.
The minister has in recent years been dogged by controversy, first with her support of a diet of garlic, beetroot and olive oil instead of anti-AIDS drugs. Now there's more. The ANC's had to admit she's a convicted thief. A well-respected South African newspaper alleges Shabalala Msimang's an alcoholic and question why she was allowed to have a liver transplant when other alcoholics are turned down for the operation.
The newspaper which led the attack on the health minister's beetroot remedy is the Johannesburg-based Sunday Times.
I would say that African media and, say, Sunday Times in South Africa are still almost in experimental mode, trying to find ways of tackling government personalities. The media is very frustrated. People, AIDS activists are very frustrated. AIDS sufferers are extremely frustrated by what the health minister has been doing. And they find that they can't do anything about it. This is a person who is one of the liberators, very close to another liberator, Mbeki. So what the media is doing now is to try and dispense that anger, raw anger, against her, hoping that by being very personal might make her collapse as a minister.
I think the most striking thing about the coverage of the AIDS issue in South Africa is the fact that that the media is still, despite all the pressure that's been put on it on this issue, is still out there, still arguing. There's still journalists out there trying to show the truth and trying to really show the real stories around AIDS.
Last month, the editor of the Sunday Times, Mondli Makenya, was threatened with arrest on charges of illegally possessing the health minister's health records. The South African National Editors Forum were outraged at the charges, saying the move threatened freedom of expression. But behind the personal attacks on Manto lies the bigger question of how the South African government is tackling the AIDS epidemic and whether they are in denial about its causes and treatment.
I think the media has a very big role to play. I think we could play an even bigger role because I think that this isn't just an issue that makes for interesting copy. I think that in South Africa today, with the prevalence of HIV, we actually have a huge responsibility to make a difference.
We have a very strong government that is securely in power and securely in power for many years to come. So the media plays a particular role in providing a centre of power outside of government, a kind of counterbalance.
You have to understand, for example, that the government of South Africa is not really held accountable by opposition, political opposition, as it should. So the media now has to play the role, not just of its natural, traditional, critical role that it needs to play as the media, holding governments accountable, questioning things that are going wrong, but it's almost playing the role of a political opposition.
But the ability of the Sunday Times to turn the spotlight on the South African government may be under threat. In recent weeks, it has been revealed that the John Com Group, which owns the paper, and a host of other titles, may be subject to a takeover.
The problem has emerged because some of the potential buyers of the John Com Group, which is a very large and influential and powerful group, media group, that some of the buyers are in government, in the presidency, hold key positions in the ANC and in government. And clearly it would be a loss to the independence of our media if somebody within the presidency, for example, were to get their hands on one of the most important and independent and outspoken newspapers like the Sunday Times, which is part of the John Com Group.
The consequences could be very serious for the South African press.
I do think that it'll have very unfortunate consequences. I think you would find the editor would be fired. Some of the top journalists would probably leave or be fired. And the newspaper would stop criticising the government. And I think that would be a tragedy because they've done some outstanding work.
There are certain things which do have a threat to the media. For example, there has been a threat by government to withdraw, or by certain people in government to withdraw advertising from the Sunday Times, and that's in response to a story we wrote about the Minister of Health, among other things, which is a worrying sign. Also, the ANC has indicated that they'll be discussing the possibility of a media tribunal at the Polokwane conference next month, and that would obviously be quite a worrying thing.
The eyes of the world will be on that ANC conference next month, as its more pressing task will be to nominate a new president. Just how far will the South African government go to avoid criticism?
There's quite a lot of tension at the moment. The media has been quite outspoken in its criticism of aspects of the government, and the government is responding quite fiercely in criticising the media. There is, from within some government circles, a call for some kind of action, but that's quite a fierce debate, even within government, about whether anything should be done about that.
I think it is this over-enthusiasm of ANC government in South Africa to keep trying to go back and live in that dream of the Liberator Party that shouldn't be criticized, that shouldn't be questioned, that may destroy South Africa in the end. And I feel that they must open up, they must allow criticism and really know that they are leading Africa and must give an example, a good example for the rest of Africa to follow.
Our Global Village Voices now on South Africa and the HIV/AIDS story.
The health minister has had a lot of flack from the media. It's one thing to scrutinize policies and to point out when people are making mistakes in terms of policy decisions that have huge impact on, obviously, people's lives. But it's another thing, as happened recently, when people were going into sort of personal medical records to use that to build a case against the health minister. And I think the media on that occasion overstepped the mark.
There's such arguments between the press and the government. I think that the actual scale of the problem of HIV and the real seriousness of what's actually happening in the country often gets overlooked. HIV and AIDS is often reported on from a very much a kind of political perspective, but much less so from actually the point of view of people living with HIV and AIDS. All of that it does tend to get overlooked in the furore over the government and their attitude towards it.
Finally, music fans love the World Wide Web because if they like a song but they don't like the video, they can just edit their own and put it up there for all of us to see. Daft Punk are a French duo. Here's one of their best-known tracks, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, recut by someone who has excellent hand-ear coordination. It's our net video of the week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger than ever. Hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger than ever. Hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger than ever. Work is never over.